Hello there, AP Human Geo students. Let's finish learning all about the industry unit with some more additional topics. So the first thing is, I don't know if you have to copy any of the stuff down here in your notes. We're going to do an activity related to this in class. But this is talking about maquiladoras. Maquiladoras, these are special factories that you'll find typically along the border between Mexico and the United States. And these factories largely make stuff for the United States. But because of easy trade laws, companies in the United States know that Mexican workers can be hired more cheaply. They can be hired for $5.75 a day. Minimum wage in the United States is just around $7. So even though it's only a $1.25 difference, companies will choose to get those cheaper laborers. 70% of workforce in these factories are women. That's kind of interesting. And yeah, even in 2000, they started even closed some maquiladoras because China was seen as even more attractive. But there still are maquiladoras today, and they're largely building the kind of larger, heavier products that would be difficult to transport from China. So, yeah, 85% of all trade between Mexico and the USA. Wow, that's wild. And yeah, 11,500 factories along the border. Man, that's a lot. All right, moving on. Clicking the button. Okay, so least cost theory. Yeah, and we're going to talk about Weber's triangle with this too. But least cost theory, where are you going to put your factory, your distribution? How are you going to move stuff around? You're always going to try to find it to do it in the most cheap way. If you're a company and you're a business owner, you want to spend as less money as possible. You want to keep that money in your own bank account. You want to make your own profits. So the cheapest labor, the cheapest transportation. And because transportation is so cheap in the ocean, kind of the whole world is now up for grabs to be where you can find the cheapest labor. And so factories are going to continually move to the more cheaper and cheaper destinations, as long as those destinations have the infrastructure to accommodate an international shipping port. Okay? And yeah, I've mentioned this a couple times. Businesses are leaving China and making factories in South Asian countries. And probably in 20, 30 years, those South Asian countries, they're going to increase their wages. Their workers are going to demand more. And eventually, there will be factories in Africa. But that'll probably happen 40, 50 years from now. All right, moving on. So these big shipping, and then you got to find people who will work for cheap. Okay, so Weber's triangle. This is an important concept. And Weber's triangle says that wherever you put your factory is going to depend on three concepts: transportation costs, labor costs, and agglomeration. You want to have your factory kind of be close to other factories or close to other big businesses. So, and actually out of these three factors, Weber said the most important one is actually transportation cost. And not only is that a money cost, but it's also a time cost. If it takes you months to move something around the world, it just might not be worth it. But yeah, so those are the big ideas with Weber's triangle: transportation, labor, agglomeration. And we've talked about all those at length so far. Okay. So yeah, if there's one market but there's two primary sources of goods, Weber's triangle also says, like, let's say you're building a car, and to build a car, you need some glass, but you need a lot of metal. You're going to have your factory closer to the metal because it'll be a heavier product to move around, and you'll need a lot more of it. So you're going to have to weigh a lot of variables into where you build your factory. Yeah, three generalizations. So using pure materials, that's always going to dictate your market's location. The weight of the materials is going to determine where you put your factory. And yeah, I don't know. This is a bunch of fancy college level stuff, but just know that you're going to balance a lot of factors over where you build your factory, but especially you're going to consider how expensive is it to move stuff to my factory. Okay, so yeah, labor costs. Always choose the least combined costs. You just want to find the cheapest place you possibly can. A place may have higher transportation costs, but cheaper labor costs. And like, let's look at some of these examples. So minimum wage around the world. Australia's minimum wage is $16 an hour. Sierra Leone's minimum wage is 3 cents an hour. I couldn't think of a reason why you would ever build a factory in Australia. It's just too expensive. The only way you do it is if you're making some really heavy, really difficult to move thing, and people in Australia will pay a lot of money for it. Here's another one. So yeah, this is saying in purchasing power parity. So yeah, Australia just has such high wages. It's crazy. Um, Germany has a minimum wage. It's a little bit above the United States, but yeah, this United States minimum wage $6.25. Mexico $1.01. So you're probably gonna build your factory in Mexico because the workers are way cheaper. All right. But if the transportation costs are too much, then you're not going to consider it. Like Sierra Leone is only 3 cents, but I don't think there's an international port in Sierra Leone. So yeah, you can build a bunch of stuff in Sierra Leone, but you just can't move it out in a easy, efficient way. So you do have to factor in the accessibility of the infrastructure. All right, moving on. Okay, so bulk increasing industries and then bulk reducing industries. These both have a lot of connection to Weber's triangle. So a bulk increasing industry is when the industry gains weight as it goes through the production process. There should be a P right there, production process. So an example would be soda and concrete. Okay, you're not going to mix concrete in Georgia and then ship it all the way to Las Vegas. That would be ridiculous. It's ridiculously heavy. Instead, you're just going to have kind of the powdered form of concrete. You'll ship that to Las Vegas, and then you'll mix it with water, creating concrete from there. Same thing with soda. You just ship the syrup all over the country, and you mix the syrup with some other stuff, and boom, you make soda. Well, that other stuff being water. Bulk reducing industries, also known as break of bulk. These are industries where the product gets lighter as it goes through the process. Most things involving metal or paper. A lot of primary industries get lighter as you go through the manufacturing process. And the difference is a bulk increasing industry. You want that industry's factory to be as close to a city or as close to the market as possible. A bulk reducing industry, you want that to be as close to the primary source as possible. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to mine a bunch of copper ingots, ship the copper ingots to one side of the country, and then smelt them into copper bars. Like, you should probably have the copper smelter right next to the copper mine, because what else are you going to do with copper ingots? So where are you going to build your factory? Closer to the primary source, or closer to the primary sector, or closer to the tertiary sector? These are the decisions you have to make. All right, so here they are. They're breaking down some wood. Right there is a lumber mill. And here they are making paper. So this is how they do it. Right there, right next to the forest probably. Ooh, look at that big old sheet of paper. That's exciting. Here they are mixing concrete with water. And here they are bottling sodas. And there's soda bottling plants in just about every city in the United States, every major city. Okay, comparative advantage. So certain countries are naturally going to be a whole lot better at doing certain things than other countries are. So why are you going to choose one place over another? Let's think about some of these questions. So who would run a casino, hotel, restaurant better? A worker from Las Vegas or a worker from Bismarck, South Dakota? Probably a worker from Las Vegas, because there's an agglomeration of casino hotels in Las Vegas. People will be a lot more familiar with it. What would be the better place to have a beach theme park? Miami, Florida, or Toronto, Canada? Usually some students will be like, well, Toronto doesn't have any beaches, so they could use a beach theme park. But no, people go to Miami to go to the beach, so naturally, if they also have a theme park related to the beach, they're going to be excited to see that there. A better place to create a restaurant called the Pork Pleasure Palace. Mecca, Saudi Arabia, or Beijing, China? Well, if you created that restaurant in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, no one would shop there because it's literally against their religion to eat pork. So it's got to be Beijing, China. Okay, so all these examples show off comparative advantage that certain parts of the world are just going to be more inclined to do certain economic activities. Okay. Comparative advantage after specialization. So what does this show here? Corn, the United States. Oh man, how do I interpret this? Yeah, so Mexico is better at making wheat, and the United States is better at making corn. So it would just make sense for each of our countries to specialize in those particular goods. And then calculating opportunity cost. So Dad is 6 times better at search, but 25 times better at build. So yeah, it's true that Dad is better at both things, but the daughter, she is like really terrible at building. So it would make sense for the daughter to search for the Legos and for the dad to build them, even though the dad is better at both things. It's sort of like if everybody does what they are capably good at, it'll overall be better for everyone. All right. And then, yeah, here's just more about Weber's triangle. It's kind of a cool graph. And if there's a really heavy raw material, it's going to pull the ideal location of your factory closer to that raw material. If there's a really light raw material way up here, then it doesn't matter as much. So you want to build your factory close to the heavy primary goods that you will process. All right, outsourcing. So outsourcing is when a company obtains goods and services from an out-of-country supplier. Usually it's when you kind of hire people in other countries to currently work for your company. This is especially done with the tech industry, and you'll see this a lot with like phone kind of jobs. For example, I think I just got a missed call from a travel agency, and I'm pretty sure the travel agency is not based in the United States, okay? There's a very good chance that the person who tried to call me was in either the Philippines or in Ireland or in some country on the other side of the world, and they just train them to talk with such a voice that you make them think that they're living in the United States, but maybe they're not, okay? So it's... and the thing about outsourcing is this really makes some American workers upset because they're like, no, those are our jobs. They're leaving us. But, you know, it's now a global economy. And if it doesn't matter where the worker is, companies are going to find the cheapest worker they can. So that's how this concept works. All right. So, yep, here's people doing call center jobs in Asia. Here's a bunch of people hanging out on the phone lines in the Philippines. Outsourcing in the Philippines. So much fun. Here's corporate America, who's like, oh, all these manufacturing jobs are moving around the world, and the middle class of the United States, it's sinking, but they don't care. They're finding cheaper workers elsewhere. And then here's our factories leaving the United States, going to China or next stop India. That's quite telling as well. And this guy's just moving the factory across the ocean. Start shopping when you stop outsourcing our jobs, right? I relate. America's biggest export, our jobs. No. Yeah, that's the concern here. Okay, I've already talked about the British steel industry. And yeah, where's the best location for a steel plant? So steel needs 2 to 3 tons of coal. It needs iron ore and it needs limestone. And it looks like iron can be found all along the Great Lakes. Coal can be mostly found right around here. So it may just make logical sense for Weber's triangle and all these positional theories that so many of America's steel plants would be located all around these cities of Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Ashtabula, Toledo. And so much steel was made in this part of the United States back in the day that Pittsburgh's football team is called the Steelers. And that relates to that they made so much steel there. But they don't really make steel there anymore because... the plants have closed down, which is all really sad. Okay, so yep, that's how you make steel. Cool, moving on. All right, and then shipbreakers of Bangladesh. I've got a really good video about this, but it just shows you how the international economy really does try to find where they can find really cheap workers to do kind of dangerous and difficult jobs. And Bangladesh is just a classic example of this. So whenever these big container ships fall into disrepair, or they get to a point where like they really don't want to keep up with them anymore, they send these ships to get turned into scrap, and they just sail the ships up onto the beaches of Bangladesh, and they say, hey, people of Bangladesh, cut this ship up and turn it into scrap metal. And famously, these workers in Bangladesh, they get like no safety equipment, and it's really dangerous, really hazardous job. They don't get paid a lot. You get to see a really interesting video about this, but it just shows you that the international economy will find places around the world that have no safety regulations, no environmental regulations, very low pay for workers, and they will utilize people in any way they can to build up the international economy. All right, and yeah, this is a Google Maps picture of what it looks like on the beaches of Bangladesh. You can see one of these ships is having an oil leak, just leaking oil into the ocean. I mean, we don't really care, I guess. And yeah, all these just dead ships that are getting harvested up and turned into scrap metal. Okay, and then, yeah, assemble yourself a car. So even a car being built in the United States, they get parts for the car from like, 20 different states. So the supply chain for some of these products can really be quite extensive. All right, and yeah, so to go off that last picture, commodity chain. So a company that does all the factors of production. They do the primary, secondary, and tertiary. So it's, I don't know if Starbucks is an example of this, but if Starbucks had their own coffee plantations in Ethiopia, and then Starbucks, I know Starbucks does have their own coffee roasters, and they kind of package their own coffee. And then, of course, Starbucks has their own tertiary stores where you personally buy coffee. But yeah, a commodity chain is a really smart plan where sort of your business tries to do all 4 sectors of the economy. But it will always require globalization and big business. Well, will it always require it? I think it will for the most part. I think it's possible that like you could be a organic farmer who grows your own food, you package your own food, and then you go to a farmer's market and then you sell it. So that would be all 3 parts of the economic system there too. But commodity chains, generally when we talk about this, we're talking about big businesses. They're using a lot of fossil fuels to move stuff around the world. They're kind of like getting close to maybe even a monopoly over certain products. All right, let's check it out. So commodities to raw materials to manufactured to distribution. So doing all the parts of all the sectors of the economy right there. And yep, there's the oil supply chain. So first you got to find where the oil is, and then you got to pump it with oil derricks. You've got to transport it on pipelines, maybe put it on ships, and then send it to be refined, turn it into special products, store it, and then distribute it to retail markets or industrial markets. So all that's the oil commodity chain. And the banana republic. Okay, so how does a banana get split up? Well, as you know, with most things, not all the money is shared equally between all the people who work on the banana. And it looks like the vast majority of the money is sent to the tertiary sector. Okay, just-in-time delivery. What a great concept. So this is an inventory strategy where materials are only ordered and received as they're needed to be done. Because typically when you kids go into a store, you'll like walk down the soda aisle and there'll be hundreds of bottles of various sodas that you can possibly take and put in your shopping cart. But just-in-time delivery is like, you know what? We don't want to do that anymore. We don't want to have 100 of every item hanging out in our store. We want to have maybe only 10 of every item hanging out in our store. And as soon as people buy like 8 of them and we have 2 left over, that's when we're going to call up our manufacturer and say, hey, please send us more because we're running low on what we can give to our consumers. And the company Amazon is really famous at doing this strategy really well. Because, and I know that here in Las Vegas, way in North Vegas, there is a Amazon warehouse where they just have thousands and thousands of items, but they only maybe have 10 or so of each item, maybe even less of certain items. And once somebody in Las Vegas buys that thing from Amazon, they just, try to rush around and call up the manufacturer and say, okay, we need, 500 more. And then they split it up to their various distribution centers. So it's got to have really good transportation. The only way you can do just-in-time delivery is if you can drive stuff all across the country or fly stuff around the world. And Amazon.com is really good at that. They are the logistics super center, and they have done so much math and so many algorithms to determine exactly what kind of stuff people like to buy at certain times of the year. So that's just-in-time delivery, where you build it as soon as the person requests it. Okay, that's the idea. All right, so just-in-time delivery, boom. And then here's how it works. So people just talk to each other on the internet and call each other, and things get made real quick. And yeah, just in time. Customer places order. The inventory manager contacts the supplier. The supplier then puts it through the production line. They deliver it directly to the customer. So yeah, this is kind of the advanced version of it. So the inventory manager, she doesn't even have any of the thing that the customer wants to buy. The customer says, I want to buy that. And then, the manager calls up the factory, says, okay, build another one. And the factory builds it, sends it to the customer. So it's a really smart strategy. You got to just do it real fast. So here's some people working on stuff for just-in-time delivery and delivering to you in Amazon. All right, and that's it for the industry unit. Peace out.